person at the Coronado Community Center in San Diego, California. This is our first in-person meeting since the pandemic started, so thank you all for making the time to come out here. My name is Leslie Grijalva. I'm currently the acting public affairs officer for the West section of the International Bounds and Water Commission. I'm based out of headquarters in El Paso, Texas. Before we get started with the formal meeting, I just wanted to go over a few items for those that are attending virtually, and as well as a few housekeeping items for those that are here in person. For those that are joining via Teams, you should be able to see the PowerPoint presentations on your screen or whatever's being displayed on the screen. If you have called in via telephone or if you cannot see them on Teams for some reason, you can view the presentations on our agency webpage. I'll give you some time to grab a pen and I'll give the link and the call-in number for that in just a second. For those participating virtually, everybody will be muted except for those participating in person and IDWC staff. If you sign up to speak during public comment, we will announce your name when we get to that part of the agenda, and I will walk over with the microphone and you'll have your chance to give your public comment at that time. If you're connected via Teams, you should see a little icon of a little circle with a chat or a comment symbol. You can use that chat feature to ask any questions that you may have. We will be monitoring the chat and we'll make sure that at some point during the meeting, your question does get addressed. If Teams just isn't working for you, you always have the option of calling in and viewing the presentations on our webpage. The number for that is 915-320-4718. And the phone conference ID for this meeting is 986-202-518 and the pound sign. To view the presentations on our webpage, you can go to https:// and then bit.ly/3 capital N lowercase t capital Q, the number 1, the number 3, and the letter J. For those attending in person, again, thank you for being here and thank you to our board members for coming today. Some housekeeping items. There is a sign-in sheet, so please make sure that you sign in for the meeting today. We are moving towards an electronic only form of notification for all of our public meetings. So it's very important that you provide us with your contact information so that we can make sure that you're still receiving notices for the meetings. Also, for just general, if you go out these doors here to the left, the restrooms are there. There's also a water fountain. And there's also water here for anybody that might need to grab a bottle of water. So we do have copies of the agenda also available up here for anybody that might want to take a look at that. So at this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Frank Fisher. We'll be making some opening remarks today.
Thank you, Leslie. Welcome, everyone. This is truly a very important night for us. We have a new board being sworn in. And tell you, after the COVID nightmare, it's really nice now for us to meet in person and doing this hybrid virtually. This is something new that we're doing. I'm hoping that this will continue to work. We have a lot of folks who are joining us virtually. It's really important that we get as many voices, as many folks involved here as possible. I wanted to take a moment to thank our new board member, Mr. John Duncan, for helping us. He was really great helping us find venues and coming up with all sorts of ideas. I want to thank very much the city of Coronado for making this facility available. It's a wonderful facility. Their technical people as well as logistical people have been absolutely terrific helping us with everything. So thank you very much. One of the things we're going to have to do is, well, before I do that, I wanted to first of all express the gratitude of Commissioner Hiner for everybody being here. Unfortunately, she can't be here because she's on her way to Washington to testify at a congressional subcommittee about the work we're doing, but she really does appreciate all the work you're doing. And if she could be here, she'd definitely be here in person. And I hope she'll be able to make one of these future meetings. One thing we have to do before too long here is it's traditional for the board to come up with a co-chair. among yourselves, nominate someone, somebody who feels like they can do something like that, maybe do a little extra to work with us on things like tours and future presentations that we want to be able to give to you. We want to make this as relevant as possible, and we need your input on what you want to do. It's already been mentioned that there's a lot of interest on a tour of the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant, and we're going to go ahead and organize that. Things like that. What is it that you want to hear presentations on? Because we can come up with a lot of presentations, but we want to make it as relevant as possible for you. The other thing I want to mention is this meeting is being recorded for our minutes purposes, so we can write minutes and get the word out to as many people as possible. So just so everybody is forewarned. I think I'm really excited. I am the new public affairs chief for the International Boundary and Water Commission. I've been on the job now a little over 3 months. So this has certainly been a big experience for me. Before this, I was the public affairs officer for the FBI in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So it is very different, but in many ways, it's still the same. We're still very important issues to communities, whether you're law enforcement, intelligence agency, or doing what the IBWC does. It's where the rubber meets the road, where people's lives are affected, and people are very concerned. The fact that all of you showed up here, I really appreciate it. It's a tribute to all of you that you're willing to take the time to give us some input and ask us questions. Without further ado, then I'll turn it back over to Leslie. Oh, I wanted to, first of all, introduce the members, our new members of the board. If you could, after I call your name, if you could please stand up so everybody in the back could see you. Leon Benham.
Hello, everybody.
And they're being given their appointment letters by Commissioner Heener. Dan Denham. And I believe John Duncan
Good evening, everybody.
is joining us virtually. Richard Ty. Patrick Brian McNeese. Carl Nettleton. Oscar Alberto Pombo. Mary Johnson Powell. Edward Spriggs. And John Zera. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, board members, for your willingness to serve. And now I'll turn it over to the person who makes this thing all happen. Leslie is really the power behind the curtain here, who's pulling all the levers. And she's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Frank. So we're going to go ahead and get started today with our first presentation, who will be provided by our area operations manager of the San Diego field office, Mr. Morgan Rogers.
He's behind the computer back here, so my apologies, they'll be hidden. And I can just do your page down, right?
Yeah.
Oh, 1 second. Okay, I want to get the, can you help me get the cursor? Get the cursor for me.
You'll have to use
Well, can you see this on the screen? Okay, okay. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to the new board members for joining us. We appreciate it very much. And to everybody that's here and online, thank you for joining us. Oh, okay. All right, here we go.
I'm going to have to share the screen to see people in the remote.
Still need this, this thing here.
There you go.
You can see the hand across the,
Yep.
okay. Okay, start again. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. So I'd like to start off with the presentation. giving a brief background on the IBWC since we have new members here and possibly some new people joining us. Then I'd like to go into give a summary or background of the San Diego Tijuana wastewater system, how all the components work together, where the problem areas are. Also go over the transboundary flows that we experienced over the past year, those flows down the river, as well as our canyon collectors. And then I'll talk about the projects that we're working on to respond to the transboundary flows in particular. So. Okay, so the IBWC is an independent federal agency. We were founded in the late 1800s. Our purpose was to administer the boundary water treaties between the U.S. and Mexico. Again, we're a small agency. We have about 300 full-time employees. There is a Mexican section as well as a U.S. section, so we all have our counterparts across the border. The Mexican section goes by the acronym CILA, C-I-L-A. So if you see that, that's the Spanish acronym for IBWC. Our headquarters is in El Paso, Texas. We have 9 field offices that are spread across the border from the Pacific to the Gulf of Mexico. We have quite a bit of assets, operations, and management responsibilities. That includes we manage the water deliveries between the U.S. and Mexico from the Rio Grande River as well as the Colorado River. We own, manage, and operate over 500 miles of levees, almost 35,000 acres of floodplain. We have 2 dams that also have hydroelectric plants associated with those. We have all 5 diversion dams. We have 2 bridges, and we have up to about 800 monuments, buoys, and other boundary markers across along the border. And we have 2 wastewater treatment plants. In addition to San Diego, we have one in Nogales, Arizona. So there's a lot of work for us to do. And these are some pictures here of some of the of our assets. This is a typical monument, and you'll see these along the border. Each one is within eyesight of the next one. These are surveyed in, so these define the border. The San Diego field office is located within the fence line of the wastewater treatment plant, and pretty much most of our time is spent managing the wastewater treatment plant, making sure that's operating properly and it's being maintained, and also the prevention and response to transboundary flows. We have a staff of 5, area operations manager, a civil engineering position who's in charge of overseeing the plant. And I have 2 civil engineering technicians. One of my technicians is here. I want to introduce you. It's Lonnie Connors. Raise your hand there. He's one of the guys that makes everything happen. So. All right, so here's a snapshot of the region. So I want to just point out some the highlights here. Okay, so here's the border. Coronado River comes up about in here. Here are our beaches from Coronado up north down to Imperial Beach. This is where the Tijuana River comes out into the Pacific. Again, here's the border. And about 6 miles south of the border, we have the inoperative San Antonio de los Buenos wastewater treatment plant. And just south of that, this is the ocean outfall. So whatever is not treated by our wastewater treatment plant, that wastewater is discharged down here at this ocean outfall. Now this picture here, this little insert here, is the Tijuana River watershed. So any rain within this area that has runoff, you're likely to see in the Tijuana River, and that usually ends up as a transboundary flow. So we could have a very nice day in San Diego, but it could be a rain farther down south, and we'll see some flow. I'm sorry, the question? The white area? Up in here? Oh. Someone said Salton Sea. That's as good a guess as I can give. So. Yeah, this watershed is about 1,700 square miles. Okay, here's the wastewater system. I wanted to point out just the infrastructure here. So here's the border. Here's the wastewater treatment plant. You have a pipeline here called the International Collector. About 80% of the wastewater generated in Tijuana flows through pipes and to the International Collector right here. This International Collector then flows to this pump station, PB1, which is actually two pump stations, PB1A and B. And from there are parallel pipelines, two pipelines that are pumped the wastewater up the top of this hill here. And then from here, gravity flow, bypassing the old SAB wastewater treatment plant and to the ocean outfall. The other 20% of wastewater generated goes to one of these two pump stations, the Lorales or the Mataderos. They also pump uphill where it joins these two pipes and flows down south to the ocean discharge. Okay. Right, it's a pipe, yeah, right here. Here, here, and here. Yeah, these join up here at the top of the hill. So all these pump stations are pumping up the hill, up to here, and gravity flow down south. Correct. Okay, so all this, yeah, that feeds into here in certain areas. This all feeds into these also. Okay. All right, so we have this is a pump station PB Sila. This is run by our partner, Sila. And its sole purpose is to divert flows in the river and prevent transboundary flows down the river. And this pumps to pump station PB1, and it also pumps to the International Collector. It can go to one or the other. Our preference is it does not pump to the International Collector, because a lot of the flow in the river contains treated water. There are two secondary wastewater treatment plants in Mexico, and they dump the water in the river. So about half of this flow is actually some level of treatment. We don't want to waste our wastewater treatment plant treating treated water. So our preference, and this is the way we want to operate, is any flows coming from the river goes to pump station PB1A, which bypasses the treatment plant. Okay, so pump station PB pumps to PB1 pump station or the International Collector. And from the International Collector, about 25 million gallons is diverted to the wastewater treatment plant. And then what is treated at the plant goes through this pipeline here, land outfall, and it drops about 190 feet down, and it turns into the ocean outfall and is discharged about 3.5 miles off the coast. Okay, the treatment plant is designed and permitted to treat 25 million gallons per day. That treated wastewater is then pumped through this pipeline here, which is called the South Bay Land Outfall. And it reaches the point over here, there's a structure, then it drops in the pipeline 190 feet down into the South Bay Ocean Outfall, where it's further discharged 3.5 miles off the coast. Yes. Yeah, this typically sees down here, discharge is probably 35 to 45, maybe 50 million gallons per day. It varies, but it's a lot, yeah. Correct. That is raw sewage. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, that's a good estimate. Yep. Whatever is not treated in our treatment plant is discharged into the ocean. Okay. It was over 15 years ago. I'm not sure exactly, but been quite a while. Yes. It's been operative for quite a while. When it opened, it was a showcase. They sent people down there to look at it and see how this thing worked, but it just wasn't maintained. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Goes into the South Bay National Water Treatment Plant that goes to our outlet, which flow comes to there.
We get our flow from the international collector. And so that's the wastewater generated. Right. It comes out of the international collector, this pipeline here. Right. Comes out to these pipeline here and down south and discharged in the ocean. 15 million gallons per day. We share this land outfall and ocean outfall with the adjacent City of San Diego reclamation plant. They contribute about 15 million gallons per day. The pipeline has a capacity of about 170 million gallons per day. Until you get to the end, the diffuser has a capacity of about 50 million gallons per day. That's a good question. I do not know. All I know is they do discharge about 15 million gallons per day. So I don't know what their capacity is or how much they treat. So, good question.
So, when you receive that water for 25 million, I know that, it's been a huge problem. It sounds like that you've been receiving more than that. And so your treatment plant is kind of overwhelmed. And so when that happens, any of the excess that you can't process is also put out the SBO because you don't pump it back into Mexico.
No, once we take it, it's ours.
Water and sewage water, Mexico does not separate its sewage like we do. We have a very predictable rate, but you're faced with a problem of big changes, and your plant kind of works on constant volume. And so basically, anything that goes above that, it can kind of ruin the mix, so to speak, in your treatment process.
That's right. So I think another slide will talk about some of the shortfalls and get right to that. But you're correct. When there's a combined sewer and storm drains in Mexico, so when it rains, that rain goes into the gutters combined with the wastewater. So we get a mixture of rainwater and wastewater during rain events. And usually it's a big surge with that rainwater. So we don't like that at all. Okay, we've got time. Yes, sir.
That's the reclaimed water that's pumped in the Tijuana River from the two reclamation plants.
Say it again. Yeah.
Tijuana River.
Correct.
Of that is water that is put into the river.
Yeah, it's about half, maybe a little less than half. Yeah, I think it's about half. I think those both produce about total 12 million gallons per day. The flow in the river is typically between 20 and 30 million gallons per day. Okay, John.
He was posting about transboundary flows. Yesterday was 3.8 million gallons. Is that separate from what you're talking about?
No, we have transboundary flows down the river right now, kind of stopping and going. And that was the latest flow we had over the last couple of days. Correct. That's what crosses the border. And that 3 point whatever million that was, it's really not a lot of quantity. We do. We have a gauge that measures that. Okay, every time we see there's a flow, that'll let us know. And it gives us the time that it started, and then it gives us the volumes and the flow rates. Yes. Okay. All right, so some of the challenges we have. Biggest challenge is the population growth in Tijuana, estimated about 2% per year. And here's a chart that shows the population increase from 1950 to up through 2030. So you can see. And that picture down over here, this is a typical neighborhood. You know, people will just they'll build houses wherever they can. I'm pretty sure none of these houses are connected to a sewer system. Probably no trash collection. So when it rains, this is the source of a lot of the pollution. And this is liable to be an ongoing problem. So it's, again, 2% per year is forecasted. Okay, so, yep. Okay,
57% for 2020. Infrastructure not keeping up.
correct. Infrastructure doesn't keep up. Existing infrastructure is overwhelmed. New infrastructure isn't being constructed. All of that. No, that's the population growth. So there's probably a portion of that it's as a neighborhood, but I think a lot of them probably don't.
Because of the continued anticipated population growth rate versus no infrastructure improvements, insufficient infrastructure.
I agree.
I'm getting ahead of us. 2035 projection, translated into wastewater production, and is the current plans look at addressing that level or some other level associated with some of the rate?
I recall that there were some studies with the population and the expansion of the plant, and I believe that the expanded to 60 million gallons per day of treatment take us out to 2050. I may be wrong on that, but I know that someone's looking at that. That's something we need to continue to look at. Yeah, tell you what, can I defer that question to a little later? Okay. Oh, of course, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. Got it. Okay. Huh. All right. I'm not sure we want to go over the questions again. Okay, I'll repeat the questions. All right. Okay, this slide I want to do is just to show how all these components of the wastewater treatment system are related. So we have the PB This takes water, diverts water in the river into the system. And when this pump station goes down, that means there's less flow into the international collector, which means there's less flow into the plant. So that's kind of a good thing for the plant, but then again, we have a transboundary flow. When we have problems at the plant, we will call PBCL up and say, hey, shut down some pumps or shut down completely, and then we can fix our problem. That means we now have a transboundary flow, which we don't like. On occasion, pump station PB1B, they have a power outage or a pump problem, and they go down. That means they're not taking water out of the international collector as they normally would, which means now we're taking extra flow into the plant. And pump station PB1A, okay, that is out of commission right now because of a pipe breakage. So that means this flow from PBC is not going here. It's now going into the international collector, which means there's more flow into the plant. So all these are interrelated. So when you have a problem with one, it usually makes a problem somewhere else. Sir.
I'm working on this problem of wastewater in Mexico for a long time, and it serves for many years. And in the past 20 or so years, the city group allowing developers to build their houses with decentralized wastewater treatment. In other words, in order for them to receive the permit, they had to provide a wastewater treatment plant. I found as of yesterday, 103 wastewater treatment plants in Tijuana. 3 of them are still looking in the satellite. I think they are not operating. Have you had any plan to address that goal? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'm researcher. I've been researching in Mexico. Let's enter outside. Okay, sorry. The city of Tijuana over the past 20 years has grown by allowing developers build their houses. We decentralized water treatment. In other words, since they are not connected to the main sewer line, they are, but they are decentralized. And I am doing a database following each one of them. I found as of yesterday 103 wastewater treatment facilities, and with 3 that I identified, but in the satellite pictures, but I think they are not working. I would have to go there personally to see what's going on. So a large part of the problem, and some of these plants have the permit to discharge whatever it is that they treat at whatever level they have into creeks and canyons. So my question is, since that's most of the treatment plants, do you have any plan to address those decentralized treatment plants? They are, as I said, between Tijuana and all the way to Rosarito, there are at least 103, probably 106 facilities, which for the most part, produce very low quality effluent. But they are authorized. Some of them are authorized to discharge in Matanuco creek that is there. Some of them are authorized in a basin that essentially ends up in the where the Tijuana gets their water, which is the presa, Avila Rodriguez. Some of them then are allowed to discharge in creeks that end up in the ocean.
Okay. Let me answer your question. Say that we do recognize that problem. I can also say that as of now, we're not attacking that problem, but that's something we need to look at as we continue to look for sources of flows down the river and everywhere else. We will get to that. I think I'm also aware that there are some developments that aren't connected to any system. So there's a mixed bag there. So there's a problem that we need to get into that. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Okay. Okay, so this map shows where the problems are in the system. So first of all, we have junction box number 1. This is part of the plant. This regulates the flow from Mexico into the plant. Now, this junction box has a valve that goes in and a valve that goes out. Neither of those valves are operable. The design of this junction box did not allow for replacing the gates. There is a project to fix this, but as of now, we have no control for the flow that comes into the plant. We basically take whatever comes in. The international collector, there is a crack in this collector right about there. So if we were to restrict the flow into the plant to the 25 million gallons per day, when we're getting 30 now, that will put pressure into the international collector and it will overflow in this crack. And we had that experience about a year ago until we made some adjustments to junction box 1. Pump station PB1B, it's also a weak spot. It's an old pump station. They are getting some new pumps. We are looking at providing electric power from the US to that pump station so they're not reliant upon their generators, which are not very reliable. And then we have pipeline 1A, which has been out of commission since about a year ago. And with the loss of this pipeline, that's a loss of about 25 million gallons per day of capacity. And that flow's got to go somewhere. That's why we're getting these excess flows to the plant. So these are the 4 weak spots, and I would say every one of these has a plan to fix those. Okay, here's the weak points as far as water quality. The slide before that had to do with the flow. So water quality, we had the International Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's overloaded. We've lost our secondary containment capacity because of the excess flows. It brought in excess trash and rags, and it fouled up the systems and the mechanisms. We're in the process of contracting out the cleaning and repairs of those. And of course, we have the inoperable plant in Tijuana down at SAB. All right, now we can talk about the plant. The plant is designed and permitted to treat 25 million gallons per day. You can see in the chart on the right there, that's the flows per month over the last year. And these flows tell the story. So in July of 2022, that pipeline PB1A was operable. Everything was great. We're getting flows less than 25 million gallons per day. Pipeline broke July 31st. And since then, we've been getting an extra 5, 6, 7 million gallons per day. And it's taken a toll on the plant. So you can see from August through December. Now in December, you see it started going down. That's because we started getting rains in December. When we get the rains, PB shuts down, which means there's less flow to the treatment plant. And we do it.
Bypass. Wow.
Let me get the
Is there a certain range where the biodigesters just don't work and that you have to bypass? Is there, I mean, how much flexibility do you have?
So how much flexibility do we have to redirect the flow?
Seven, how much variance can you accept? Or is it just at 25, you have to bypass and let it
Well,
go?
I would say the question was, what do we do if we get more than 25 million gallons per day? How does the process work? Do we bypass the secondary or whatever? So I would say whatever we get, we treat. If it's more than 25, we're not likely going to hit our permit limits. Then we'll have some excesses, and then basically we live with that. We don't like it. But the alternative is we stop these flows. It's going to be a transboundary flow, untreated at all. So there's a balance that we take. Sometimes we feel that it's worth it to take excess flow, because if we didn't, that would be a transboundary flow instead. So if we go above the 25, that just means the plant's not working as it should. So we'll probably have some extra solids carry over throughout the plant, and we exceed our permit limits. Okay. All right. So again, you can see in the chart here, PVC was shut down, but we did get some surges in flow because of the rain events. We got rainwater, and then the rain started subsiding, and you see, and my apologies. Okay, you can see in the March and April timeframe, PVC is still shut down, but we don't have as much rain in the river, so we're getting some reasonable flows. You see in May, we started to turn PVC back online. Get that starting to be dry weather flows now in the river. We turned the PVC back on, so there's now much flow into the international interceptor or the collector, and then the flows in the to the plant increase again. So that's where we are today. So basically, we're back to where we were a year ago. As you see here, from August up through December, we have flows around 30 or 32. Okay. I mentioned before, the primary treatment is out of service due to these excess flows. What that means, we still have flow through the primary, it just isn't taking the solids out like it's supposed to. Some of those solids carry over into the secondary treatment, and it gets carried out in the end in our treated wastewater, and we exceed some permit limits.
Costs are not being pressed.
Did everybody hear that question?
No.
No. Okay. Tell you what, yeah, tell you what, how about raise your hand? And just-
The question was when the wastewater treatment plant exceeds the 25 million gallon day limit, what sort of stresses does that put on the system? And what are the consequences of that in terms of maintenance or deferred maintenance that's not being addressed because of lack of funding?
Very good question, and it has a big impact. So when we have excess flows, that means more wear and tear on the plants. Right from the start, you get more sediment, and we get more trash coming into the system. That has wear and tear on the pumps, has wear and tear on valves. When we have a lot of flows, we have to sometimes shut down if the flows are coming in too fast, or our equipment doesn't work. We have to manually clean up the trash and all that. It takes our operators away from the regular maintenance. So we do get a backup of regular maintenance, but that is a problem, deferred maintenance. So there is a lot of consequences to these excess flows.
What's the cost of that?
Yeah, we do. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a big figure. It's millions of millions. There's definitely cost of that.
So just to be clear, so I understand, if pump station sealant is down, those flows go into the river. When you're overloaded, where do the flows go that you're unable to treat when over the 25 million gallon? Do they go back into the outfall or do they go back into the river?
Whatever the plant takes, we treat, and then it goes off the coast. We don't turn anything back. We can't turn anything back. We don't have the capacity. There's no way of rerouting excess flows somewhere else. It goes through the plant.
It just doesn't get treated.
It just doesn't get treated as it's supposed to.
It goes into the outfall.
Right.
Okay.
Goes out, 3.5 miles off the coast. All right. Okay, this is just a picture, shows this is the ocean outfall 6 miles south of Tijuana, which is about down here. This is a 4-lane highway up here, just to give you an idea of how big this pipeline is. And if you Google Tijuana ocean discharge sewage, you probably see a good YouTube showing this. But it's a really an impressive video, the flow coming out of there. Okay, so let me talk about the transboundary flows that we've had this year. We get transboundary flows down the river, which can end up out in the Pacific. We also get transboundary flows through the canyons. All these green areas, these are low areas, these are canyons. And we have canyon collectors. We have 5 canyon collectors within these canyons. And these canyon collectors, whatever comes across the border, these canyon collectors collect that flow and send it to the plant. And then again, we have PPC to handle the transboundary flows down the river. Okay, now sometimes the flows overwhelm these collectors and they go past, and then they can end up into the Tijuana River.
Valves are shut off and they're allowed to bypass because it's too much volume, correct?
That is correct. So when it rains, we are able to shut down the canyon collectors here and here. This is Goats Canyon and Smuggler's Gulch, because it would overwhelm. It does overwhelm canyon collectors. Plus, we don't want rainwater in the plant because it messes with the chemistry and the volume is too great. So we shut these down. These other ones are not, we don't get as much flow, but we can't shut these off. So whatever goes in these goes to the plant. Okay, there you go.
So when you don't have rainfall, but you still get flow in the canyon. You're collecting water in those canyons. So where does that come from? Is that just sewer water?
Yes.
Out of people's backyard?
Yep, exactly.
So when you get the sewage coming down the canyons and it's not raining, it comes through to the canyon collectors. Goes like at Smuggler's Gulch, Goat Canyon, and the others. And then that gets put into a pipe and sent to the pump station on Hollister Street, and then back to your treatment plant.
That is correct.
So the pump station on Hollister work both ways? Does it have anything to do with the ocean outfall? Or is it only for collecting the transboundary flows from the canyon collectors?
That's correct.
So if we hear that plant running or we smell that plant running, that pump station running, that means there's it's in the process of collecting the transboundary flow and pumping it back to the main plant?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, so, you know, the candy collectors at Goats and Smugglers, there are pump stations that pump that to the plant. Goats Canyon has its pump station, then it goes to Hollister, and then Smugglers goes to Hollister, and then Hollister, it goes to the plant. And those are typically running all the time. I have never seen where none of the collectors have some flow. So right now, we're in good shape. We do have flow at Goats. Typically, the flows from these collectors are not more than maybe 1 or 2% of the total flow in the plant. So it's really minimal. Okay, so let me back up, talk about the river, and then I'll come back to the canyon collectors. Okay, so this has been a record year as far as flow down the Tijuana River. We had some record rains from January through March, and this is what this shows. Like you can see the comparisons from year to year. In 2023, we already have over 30 billion gallons of flow down the Tijuana River. Now, this is not raw sewage. This is rainwater mixed in with some with sewage and the dry weather flows in the river. So I sometimes see people say that there's 32 billion gallons of raw sewage coming down the river. It's a mixture of rain and sewage and everything else. So we have the dry weather flows every day, all year round. When it rains, it's basically on top of that. So it does dilute it a bit, but it also brings that contamination down the river, and it deposits in the soils for the next rain. So anyway, we're already at 32, and we have the rainy season starts up again in October. So it's not going to end up here. It'll be much higher.
What happens to the sludge? Sludge from the residue that comes out of the sewer plant. I understand it. Mexicans are dumping on the ground. So it rains, the water flows right through all that sewage, and that just complicates the problem.
Well, you're talking about the sludge that Mexico takes back to Mexico after the treatments. That is spread out down south. Okay, you're talking about the plants?
All the plants are gonna accumulate sludge over time. Together. What are they doing with the sludge?
Okay. Yeah, the treatments, all generation of sludge. Solids come out of the wastewater. They're sludge. So at the end of that treatment, sludge belongs to Mexico, and they have trucks every day. They're from 5 to 10 loads a day. They haul that sludge down south into Mexico, and they have like a landfill near the old SAB where they spread it out. They mix it with dirt and spread it out. And whatever else happens there, that's all theirs. We're not involved with that at all. But the sludge belongs to Mexico, and they haul it off.
Extensively, and there is a material that is not natural. And if you look at it, especially in Goat Canyon, it is super fine. And in projects that we work down there, we've tested it, and basically it's not a natural occurrence. It's not sand, gravel, cobblestones. It's a super fine. I believe it's a man-made some type of sludge. And then as you go up into the other channel, the other river channel that goes towards Tecate, if you go through those rivers, there's ponds from developments that you can't even walk up to. But during the rains, there's no stopping that from coming down. And if you go to the mouth of the sloughs, right now, it is a black It really is pretty foul, and it goes from the mouth of the sloughs all the way back up to Hollister Road. And you sit at Hollister and you smell it. And that's where this disconnect of sludge is really, it's so apparent that it is some type of material. And I'm not saying it's come from your plant, but if there are septic tanks that are up the Rio Alamo on that leg, and if you drive up there in the low parts of that river, you have these, it is sewage. And so you cannot, I'm not blaming or anything, but it is pretty straightforward that it is sludge, and that basically when it rains, like the rains we had this year, it just comes down, and because it's heavy, it tends to fill the low spots. The water travels, but the sludge is in the bed load, so to speak, and it basically just sticks. And right now, our sloughs is basically full of it. And so that's, I think, if I'm addressing this guy, but that's what we kind of see, and so that's it.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. There's sludge produced in the wastewater treatment process, which I was talking about. Mexico takes down south. We get a lot of sediment through our canyon collectors, which we accumulate and haul off. And absolutely, there's some black stuff that comes down the river, and we have transboundary flows, which is obviously, it's probably sewage related that accumulates. So yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so they take the sludge from your treatment plant here, they take it back to Mexico, you said they take it south. But you said they're taking it near San Antonio de los Buenos, but that's a failed treatment plant. So if they're taking it near there, what's to keep that from going out their ocean outfall or out their pipe to the ocean at the failed treatment plant? And that's coming all the way back up to ID again. Is that what's happening? Is anybody monitoring that? It seems like a really bad place to dump a lot of sludge. I mean, shouldn't it be taken off to mixed in and composted to farmland somewhere? Or it shouldn't be dumped in a canyon and come back here. It shouldn't be dumped where the water can take it to the ocean and then it comes back up to the beaches. Is anything? So that might be what's happening to it?
Probably not. There'd probably be some erosion, but yeah, we are not monitoring their landfill. We do know where they are depositing or dumping their sludge. And I'm not sure if there's a problem with erosion that it's reaching the ocean or not. I mean, that's a good question. So I don't know the answer to that. I will carry that comment, Mary. Okay.
My name
I
is
will-
Jeff
I will-
Thomas, US
I got it.
I visited the sludge site about 2 weeks ago personally. They mix it in with layers of alternating sludge and dirt, sort of loose material that's there. The comment was, that this was in the desert, they might be able to use it in construction because it's compactable material. But you can see from Google Earth pretty clearly next to the ponds, piles of what is sludge, and that's layered up. The erosion, I don't see how I'm not a scientist, but I see a slope and I see the ocean less than a mile away. So surely some of that gets there, but it did seem, again, from a very uneducated eye, not to be anything like the quantity of the sewage it's actually hitting. So in terms of where you're going to put your effort and energy, the sludge is not good, but it's not the biggest problem.
I'm going to ask everybody to hold their comments so that Morgan can finish his presentation. We do have a second speaker that we would like to give the courtesy of being able to do the presentation. So if everybody can hold their questions till the public comments, we'll go ahead and let Morgan finish, please.
Public comment on.
Not yet, sir.
Yeah, hold your comments. Yeah, hold your comments. We'll have a chance. Okay, the canyon collectors, this year we've had basically 2 transboundary flow events. One had to do with the pipeline break down near SAB. And the other one was due to the excessive rains we had, brought a lot of sediment and clogged up our collectors. So these are kind of almost like natural events. Well, not natural events, but these are kind of like good transboundary flows. This isn't just a matter of, they got a line break across or the people are dumping. So anyway, 2 events had minimal transboundary flows to our canyon collectors. These pictures, this shows a typical source of flow. This is a manhole, and there probably is some rocks or sediment in this pipeline, causing it to overflow out of the riser. Okay. Anyway, I took pictures of each of our 5 collectors yesterday, and this is what they look like. This is Stewart's Drain. This is a typical flow we see every day, all year round. And I include this photo of Stewart's Drain only to show you that Border Patrol was replacing the gratings instead of the typical horizontal and vertical bars. They're using this honeycomb design, which is supposedly harder to cut through. This is Silver Drain. All of our canyon collectors, we've added sandbags. This is a requirement during dry season, at the beginning of dry season. Just gives an extra capacity, holding capacity of these canyon collectors. And these are the other ones. Canyon del Sol, no flow. Smuggler's Gulch, no flow. Goats Canyon. This is the only one that we have any significant flow. But you can see here, it is contained and it's going to the plant. Okay, so what we do to respond to or prevent transboundary flows, we do have some pumps that sometimes if we have a lot of flow, one of our collectors will bring some pumps to speed up the pumping and diversion of the flow to the plant. And then we have our sediment berm. And typically at the beginning of the dry season, we put this berm up and this holds the peak flows. This year, we've been had some trouble getting this sediment berm in place. The flows have been too great. And, but it's going up tomorrow. And we're going to see how it goes with its peak flows. It might be tight, but we're still getting a lot of flows for a sediment berm. But that's one of our main prevention methods, and it's been really successful over the years. Okay, projects. The JB1 rehab. Remember that was the junction box that the valves were inoperable. We can't control the flows. We do have that. That will be awarded anytime now. We have a future project for sediment removal in the Tijuana River Channel. We probably have quite a number of feet of sediment that's in the river. And the levee restoration. Here's the Tijuana River, the channel. This is our north levee. This belongs to the IBWC. There's also a south levee. This needs to be raised. This picture right here shows after one of our rains, not a lot of elevation difference between the water level and the top of the levee. So the plans are to raise that. Okay, now minute 328 was an agreement between the U.S. and Mexico for a number of projects. In the United States, that included the expansion and the rehab of our wastewater treatment plant. And the goal was to double the capacity to 50 million gallons per day. It also includes some rehab, which is necessary to make the expansion successful. So that, we are still working the numbers on that. We do need more funds. We're still working on the scope versus the funding sources. We do expect to go out for design bids by the end of this year and award the design portion to affirm the first part of next year. And we're looking at it 1 year for design and then 2 to 3 years for construction. So that takes us out to about 2027. Okay, in Mexico, there's a number of projects. Some of these we helped fund. Some of these are funded by Mexico. I can say they're not all funded, but the main projects are rehab of PB-Sila, upgrading the pumps, which increases reliability. Also rehabbing pump station PB1, again, replacing pumps and the reliability of that. There is a project to rehab the international collector, which has that crack. That's supposed to start this summer. Repair pipeline PB1A. If we get that online, it'll solve a lot of our problems. We're still pushing to have some kind of a date to start that. Right now, they're talking about a year from now, which is really unacceptable to us. This has probably the highest level of attention to get that started. We also want Mexico to start reusing that treated water instead of dumping it into the river and adding to the load to our plants. And then there's a reconstruction of the wastewater treatment plant in Mexico, increasing that from 12 million gallons per day to 18. That is supposed to go out for design, I think this fall. So that is a project that is going to happen. That should be online in 2026. So there's a lot of effort going on, and I think I will stop there. Leslie, any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions if you can hear me.
Go ahead.
So the projects you just mentioned that Mexico is going to be working on, are those the projects that are being funded from that 140 or $148 million commitment that was given?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and so of all of those projects, you said the one that we have the data on is for sure, it appears is for this summer? Is that the international collector?
Yes, we're pretty certain on that. Actually, I've seen the stockpile of pipe for that project.
Okay.
Let's go.
One thing that's interesting to me, and I don't know if there's any discussion on it, so I wanted to ask you if you've heard any, is I know that SAB plant, I know you showed the picture, but I don't think most members of the public really realize that sewage discharge is right at the coastline, right? So that's
Discharge.
at the SAB, well, where the SAB plant is, that discharge, that pipe you showed with the sewage coming out of it, that's right there at the coast, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much just down the road.
And so it's interesting. I don't know why. Do you know why they don't have an outfall pipe? I know our Point Loma Wastewater Treatment Center has the outfall pipe. The outfall pipe you showed earlier on the US side at the border has, an outfall 3.5 miles off the coast. But is there any discussion about adding an outfall pipe to that? Because my understanding is that might dramatically affect the flows that come up the coast to Imperial Beach and Coronado.
There has been discussion of an ocean outfall for the new SAB. I'm not sure where that is, but there was discussion on that, and I think that would be preferred by us.
Yeah, it seems that the cost benefit of that would be money extremely well spent, but I never hear any discussion about it. So I appreciate we can follow up and see what happens with that. One other just quick question I had is in regard to the maintenance. You were talking about how the gallons per day of sewage that exceeds the capacity of the treatment plant cause a lot of the problems with the ability to do maintenance. But when I was also at the USMCA EPA meeting in Imperial Beach a month or two ago, there was discussion that a large part of the maintenance problem was due to not adequate funding for IBWC. So I just wondered if you could maybe add a little bit more clarification on that, because also at that meeting, it came out that there was less funding for maintenance for IBWC this year than in the last couple of years. And then I know you may have seen, I don't know, but there was an article out in the Union Tribune recently by the mayor of Imperial Beach, Paloma Aguirre, talking about, this has recently come to her attention. I think the number is, $150 million in deferred maintenance. So I don't know if you can add any more clarification or color on that, but I think it's important information for the public to be aware of.
Yeah, I've seen the figure of 150 million for deferred maintenance, so I can say that's a good estimate. I would say that the plant has been underfunded for years, and we spent $2 million for capital improvements in that plant between 2010 and 2020. My figures, we should be spending $4 or $5 or $6 million per year on that plant. So the IBWC, their budget for construction for projects has been in the $30 to $50 million per year. And that serves all of our infrastructure. Remember, we have another wastewater treatment plant, we have 2 dams, we have 2 hydroelectric plants. We are underfunded. I can say that our commissioner certainly recognizes that and is trying to correct that. All of our FY24 budget for all of it, IBWC, is going towards our plant. So that's how much emphasis that we're putting on the plant today. But a lot of our problems have been the underfunding of the plant over the years. So you are correct.
Yeah, I appreciate your candor on that, because that's something that I think the public needs to know, so we can help pressure, the government to increase the funding. And that's something the city of Coronado is working on with our federal advocates. So I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Yeah, our funding does come through the State Department, so we are independent federal agency. However, we do have ties to the federal, to the State Department. So I'm not sure if that's an obstacle or not, but
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask the old questions so that we could have our second presenter give his presentation. I promise we'll keep working around for everybody's questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Oscar Romo. He's the executive director of the nonprofit Alta Terra, which works on conservation. He's been with that organization since 2003. Before that, he worked with NOAA and UCSD. He's also a former chair of the Citizens Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Oscar Romo.
Thank you. You heard a lot about wastewater. Now I'm going to learn about trash coming from Tijuana. Let's hear about that. We're going to talk about trash. So, I'm going to show some of the maps, and this is just to reiterate why we're getting all this trash. So those are the tributaries that connect to the Tijuana River. And at one point, we needed to correct that because maps were done wrongly. We needed to incorporate all the changes in topography that had happened in Tijuana in the last 20 years. So this is the new map. And this is a map that shows the Tijuana runoff infrastructure. And I wanted to put the two maps back to back because this one mimics the tributaries. In other words, these tributaries are being lined with concrete. And that's one of the reasons why we see all this trash. Because the velocity of the water increased dramatically. And you see all those dots, the dots on the map represent the sediment basins. There's 26 around the city of Tijuana, and that shows progress. However, now people are dumping in the sediment basins where those were not designed to handle trash, only sediment. So that trash ends up in the main river. We did this map at UCSD in 2007, and by then, population was below 2 million, and the footprint of the city was this. Nowadays, the footprint is a lot larger. It passed these hills over here. It almost reaches the city of Tecate, which is around here. And then this is the Rodriguez Dam. Now the Rodriguez Dam is totally surrounded. And the river is the feature, the lowest point in this hydraulic topography of the city of Tijuana. So everything connects to this area. And as you can tell, this is Playas de Tijuana, and this area remains empty, which means that whatever you put in a channel or in the soil ends up in the Tijuana River eventually. This is a typical example of how the trash arrives to the Tijuana River. These are runoff channels. People don't have a place to put their trash. So they come, and before the winter storms, they put all the trash there. It's very practical. The trash goes away. So when there's no trash collection, trash disappears. And that cycle repeats all over the city. Tires are special kind of waste managed by the state. But most people in Tijuana are driving cars that use second-hand tires from us. But many of those tires doesn't worth a penny, so they get dumped because otherwise they need to pay a dump fee. And they appear in creeks. This is another typical solution. The trash accumulates in a poor neighborhood. There's no trash collection. The is burning. There are many places, these signs are common in Tijuana. Federal land, don't put your trash here. You can tell that nobody cares.
For it to happen and it doesn't happen.
Also, some people pay private people, private companies, and sometimes it's just a pickup truck to remove the trash from their houses. They don't. They go to those sediment basins and put the trash there. This is hospital waste, believe it or not. So instead of paying to put the solid waste into the landfill, it was dumped. And this is one of those smaller maquiladoras, large maquiladoras. They mostly behave well. They collect the trash, they recycle, or they transport it to the landfill. Smaller companies that serve those maquiladoras are under the radar screen, and they just put the trash behind their property, almost always in a canyon, in a creek. And this is a typical example of something that has happened since after the war ended. Tijuana has been growing pretty fast, and most of the neighborhoods are the product of illegal acts of urbanization, no permits. It's cheaper actually to build and then ask for forgiveness. So there's a process called the name. You go back and say, I didn't ask for a license. Okay, you pay the fee and you get a license afterwards. So when you see these neighborhoods being developed, immediately you see trash deposited in every place. We know a lot about trash. We've been studying trash for a long time. So we know everything, where we can find it. We have maps of all the illegal dump sites. We know exactly what is in there. And we make observations. It's very hard to measure the amount of trash. So it's only through observations. We cannot gauge it like water. It flows, but it's difficult to separate. And this is an interesting picture because Tijuana is now growing vertically. But you see all these neighborhoods around here, which are on each side of the Tijuana River Channel, the tops are about 500, 600, 700 feet above sea level, and the river is the lowest point. So it doesn't matter what you put in the street in an illegal dump, it ends up in the river by gravity and also by the force of water. The picture was taken before the storms, and then it rained, and all that water comes mixed with trash. And I just took several pictures to show you that there are neighborhoods that seem that they live next to a lake. That's the Coronado River Valley. That amount of water carries very large amounts of trash. Same thing here. You see the top of these hills are 700 feet above sea level. They're short distances. So they carry the trash pretty fast because of the tilt on the land. Some of you may know about the Tijuana River Valley Recovery Strategy. Probably some of our members belong to that group. And we have several priorities there. Number one, dealing with Mexico, communicating with Mexico, approach them to find solutions. And then we have understanding the flow of water, but also the flow of trash. We want to reduce the sources. It's going to take a while. I'm going to explain more about it. Capture before it crosses the border. Then we need to find resources in Mexico to maintain and operate landfills. We want to inform the community in Mexico and here. And these are priorities, and it seems like the last priority is to conserve natural resources. It's not. It's just that there are other more urgent matters. We're going to install some barriers to collect or to control, rather, the floating trash. We're not going to take care of solids like tires or sediment. The trash ones we're going to deploy are not designed to do that. And this is our project area. It's actually the boundaries of the commission, the National Boundary and Water Commission. This is their land, and our project happens right there. The purpose is to place these trash barriers called trash booms. They float and they take all the floating trash. I'm going to show you some examples. The reason we are putting it here is, this is the concrete ban after crossing the border. But IBWC and Border Patrol managed this side. They have multiple operations per day, and we couldn't interrupt the flow of vehicles. So we move our trash booms a little bit behind, a couple of 1,000 feet. They're basically these barriers, again, float and collect the trash. And we have two sections, one that is here, and it needs the other one. And these are a different type of design because the pilot channel is flowing year round. So we also want to collect that trash. We use hydraulic models, and Morgan already talked about plans to improve the levees. So we're using exactly the same hydraulic models. So we're going to place them here. We care about how the water behaves in this area along with the trash to prevent trash from flowing here. What happens out, that trash ends up in many places in South San Diego and Imperial Beach. Those are the models we're using. And this is a profile of trash homes that we are currently using at smugglers. So when we installed them, deployed them in 2019, and they're behaving really well. One thing about these trash homes is that this shell is made out of high-density polypropylene collected in Tijuana at dump sites. We're repurposing that trash into sheets that form these shells. We deploy them using heavy equipment. We're going to install some anchors. We have some restrictions about placing anchors inside the riverbed. So we are exploring ways to do it without excavating. And this is kind of what we're going to do. We're going to put a column and then some gravity anchors to hold those trash booms in place. We need to avoid the drag by having heavy blocks of concrete on one side. And then since water is going to raise, we have a column to prevent the trash booms to move upwards. That's a typical way we install them. And this is a picture taken at Smuggler's Gulch in 2022. As you can see, this is floating trash, only floating trash. And it's a lot. I don't know exactly how many cubic yards, but probably a couple of 100 cubic yards in one single event. So we're collecting large amounts of trash every time it rains. And those colorful objects here, those are made out of high density polypropylene, which is what we're recycling and repurposing to build the trash barriers. The trash is going to be placed in trash bins. And then this is the area, the footprint of the area where trash will be collected. It's pretty large. It's 6.2 acres, probably more. And I'm sure that it's going to expand into Mexico. And I'm already hearing complaints from Mexican authorities that the trash is going to accumulate on their side of the border. So be it. And then the trash will be moved from this area in a couple of routes to a staging area. Finally, to the Otay landfill, we're going to contribute to these parks that are going to build with above the trash. That's not all. There's a research component, and it's not just another study. We're doing so many studies before, but this time we're going to have my assistants join families that go shopping. And we want to know exactly what they're buying and what they're throwing away immediately, almost. If there's a way to identify the routes of the trash, what we're trying to build is a algorithm so we can understand how much trash we can expect after every storm event. So by calculating or knowing the amount of water flowing in the system, thus understanding the behavior and the mishaps of the authorities at the municipal level, the state level, and the federal government of Mexico, we might be able to come back to them with some suggestions. It's another country, so we cannot impose on them anything. But locally, we have been successful in making them do things. And that's my contact information if you want to learn more about it.
Are there any questions?
My question is, have you thought about putting any kind of collectors at Yogurt Canyon area? Yogurt Canyon is about 100 yards east of Monument Mesa, and across the border flows trash. It's not sewage, but it's runoff. And trash is the reason Borderfield State Park is closed 7 months a year. And I am a volunteer there, and we picked up like 1,000 pounds of tires and plastic in the last month and a half. And there's much more to pick up.
And I've been collecting trash myself since Dr. McCoy was trying to create the Tijuana River Estuary. I was one of his volunteers. I want to, however, I made proposals probably 10 years ago, no more, because the recovery strategy was published in 2012. And my proposals went in long before that. So I waited about 12 years to get the funding to do one project. But I'm hopeful that all those projects will eventually happen. There's 7 canyons, or 7 canyon streets across the border. And the idea is to place trash pumps at every one. So far, we did it at Smugglers, and now we're doing this one. This one is the most important one because of the volume. We expected to collect about from 30 to 45,000 cubic yards per storm season, which is just an immense amount of we can feel and stay with all that trash. The idea is then to move into the other treatment.
Well, I've been down there for the last, since 2014. And I noticed when you first put in your trash booms, and I documented before and after, and when we get the big flows, they don't seem to work because they rise up and actually the suction of the water just sucks the trash underneath. And I have videos of this, and it seems as if that what does work are the old 3-pipe horse crossings. They're heavy, they collect all the trash, and I just really have a problem because it seems as if that trash booms in a typical way, they always work in low flow areas and like go can. But in high flow areas like smugglers, they don't work. And so big rain events like we just had, the trash, I'm just really concerned that to invest so much into this without more study, it's just really concerning because from what I see, they just don't work.
Thank you. We realized that because was damage rain. So we're making modifications. My engineers are calculating everything and redesigning this so we can capture all the floating trash. It's except for the heavy objects that we wouldn't be able to collect. The expectation is to collect the floating trash and not have these problems. However, the river is really wide and the velocity on that river is very high. So some of the trash is going to escape or even if we put something really heavy, the load is just gigantic.
Just to follow up, I'll just speak loud. So is there a trash, is there a facility in Mexico that's like Otay landfill? Do we have a landfill in Mexico for trash? And if so, where is it?
There is two places. One is called Valle Redondo, which is about 10 miles from downtown. And there's another one, the headwaters of Gold Canyon. Those are the two designated landfills for the city. And the concessionaires collect trash from customers. The rest of the city is served by the trucks owned by the city, and they use either side to deposit the trash.
Okay.
First, Leslie, are the presentations going to be available after the meeting? Are they going to be put on the website or? And I have other questions.
Yes, just to inform everybody, the presentations are posted on our website, so they are available for anybody to download.
First, Austin, great presentations. Thank you. My question goes to Morgan, because I didn't get a chance to ask my question at the end of your presentation. You spoke about the fact that there's going to be about a cost of 150 million in deferred maintenance for the existing plan. Congress authorized 300 million for the plan as part of the USMCA. Obviously, that was intended for the expansion of the facility to be able to reach that 50 million. But you also said that we're now looking at probably a 60 million gallon need by 2035. So wanted to see if you could address that issue, but then also you talk more about the work that IBWC is doing to analyze the gap and how much this is really going to be costing. Because if you go back to 1985, the city of San Diego hired a Blue Ribbon Commission, and they estimated back then that to address Tijuana's long-term needs, it's going to cost between 750 million and $1 billion. And that was back in the mid-'80s. So I feel like, we have been kicking this can down the road for 40 years and not fully addressing the true cost of this wastewater treatment problem that we have here in Puerto Rico.
Okay, we are finishing up an assessment of the plant, looking at various scenarios or scopes to include maybe 40 million gallons to 50 million gallons, 50 million gallons with no peak, and 60 million gallons. I think we're pretty sure that we're not going to get the 60 million gallons today. That'll be something in the future. We're still looking at the scope. I can say that the cost right now is maybe it's, well, okay, well, I really can't talk about the cost because we haven't put the contract out for bid. We can't compromise the contracting process. I'm not sure I answered your question, but did I? Or not?
No,
But, oh, yeah. Okay.
I do have some follow-up on that. So when that 300 million was authorized, I thought a lot of it was going to be designated in Mexico. None of it was. Is that right?
There's 7 million Mexico's committing to the plan.
The 300 million is going to the plant. But it's not enough, you know that.
So what I went back and looked at it, and this Arcadis report that I have here, big long read, but it really was the basis of the 300 million. It has a litany of about 15 different projects in Mexico and in the United States. And it's a really interesting report, and it's really thorough. It goes into Mexico and looks at all their equipment in detail, pictures, their operational data. And like you mentioned, is that the biggest problem that they have, the report said, if you just operated the equipment properly and maintained it, it would reduce our beach closure days down to about 70 days a year, which essentially are rain events, which we have to close down anyway. And so that original report, the Arcadis, was issued in 2019. The USMCA agreement was signed in 2020. And so anything beyond that 300 million is not the basis of that report or that budget estimate. It really came out to about 256 million, but it put on a 30% margin for error on top, and it came out to about 300 million. And it's a great read because you really see inside of how Mexico, when it just doesn't maintain the proper the equipment. So if we go and through the NAD bank or whatever, however it's funded, is that what assurances, how do we get Mexico to maintain the equipment? Because, again, you said SAB, if you look back in history, was brand new. And in 20 years, it's now not functioning because of lack of maintenance. And I know that picture of the sewage coming through down into the ocean, but when my friends go surfing, I have them come back, and a lot of time it's dry because of the pump shutdowns. They're shutting down the pumps because of maintenance or something. So there's a lot of unknowns, it seems still, that we're looking forward to this 300 million or adding money to it, but we really don't know, do we have an end goal plan that really is defined and quantified? And, the one thing that I do know when I read the 691 page UNC plan was that a majority of the processed sewage, because if you put in a plant that does 60 or 50 million, then the outfall up Imperial Beach would have to be 50 or 60 million of outfall. So, but the rate, what they're asking for is the outfall to be upgraded to 100 million gallons a day, which is a 300% increase. And of course, with exponential growth, is that just a buffer that when the flows are overwhelm you again, because that's logical that it's going to grow, T1 is going to grow, is that we're just going to bypass and dump it again, and then we're going to be essentially at the same problem we're right now, where we have an outfall that's rated at 40 million gallons, 15 for San Diego, and 25 for Tijuana to come through your plant. But we're jumping up, quantumly an outfall off Coronado and Imperial Beach. And with the new testing of with the solids that are allowed, I think there's 15% solids. That DNA is in that solids. And so with this new testing protocol, I don't know, but I looked at it, we're gonna be shut down for almost ever because we're shut down now at what we're putting out right now for 500 days. And so, I mean, I think there needs to be some out of the box thinking and make perhaps another approach because I know that they switched on the Orange County recycling facility in March, and it's processing 130 million gallons a day, and it's recycling every bit of that through groundwater injection and storage inland. And if there ever was a perfect place to do that, it's in this groundwater basin of 1,800 square miles. And so, that's the kind of out thinking that we're looking for to be implemented because that would essentially solve the pollution coming off of Imperial Beach. And that's what our group, we've been advocating for about 3 years now. So.
Quite good. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Okay, very much. Okay,
I have a-
we'll continue that conversation.
Yeah.
I can tell you that if we expand the plant, the 60 or whatever, it's perfectly expanded, so we're gonna have new permit limits. And the ocean outfall is built to be expanded. So it should be good for 170 million gallons per day, peaking over 300. There. So that should be a problem.
I have a question, if I can, comment.
Just a second.
Thank you. This is probably like Leon's question above everybody pay grade in this room, but we're all really interested in solutions that are beyond just the finger in the dike. We're all looking for solutions beyond the finger in the dike. And Oscar, your presentation was excellent. I've known for many years you and others have been working on the issue of trash and sediment in the river basin. And I appreciate your unique perspective. It's the chief new engineer. And you each have a different kind of piece of this, but ultimately the question is, what happens at the source of the problem? And Leon touched on the problem with maintenance, but there first of all has to be a will to address the problem at its source on a fairly large scale. And this is not high technology. And this, everybody pretty much can identify what needs to be done from an engineering standpoint, except it's just a question of political will and money and capacity. So my question is this, from the standpoint of trash and sediment, from the standpoint of wastewater, sewage, two different aspects with maybe common solutions, maybe not. If Mexico were properly incentivized through USMCA or otherwise, and again, this is a big picture question. Is the capacity there to put in place the trash collection, the fine structure, and trash removal and disposal, etc.? Is it within the capacity of Mexico to do that if they were motivated to do it? Okay. Because otherwise we're just raking the leaves that keep coming down from the trees year after year. Same question basically when it comes to the generation of wastewater and unconnected sewers, breaking systems, out-of-date systems, etc. Again, it's not brain surgery, it's not new technology. Is is the capacity there? If there was political will. And I'm not concerned about the money at this point. Mexico is not really a poor country, although here on the border, it seems like they are. Is the capacity there to address these plant, pump station, pipeline, and wastewater management issues if there was a political will to do it? So trash management, etc., wastewater management, etc. Just your humble opinions about that from all you know dealing with these issues over the years. Thank you.
I agree, it's above my pay grade, but my opinion is, I think there is a genuine desire to make all this happen. Funding is an issue. They have not funded all of their projects to that minute 328. And until it's funded, it's really, I'm sure the commitment's there. Doesn't seem to be a lot of money at the border. You recognize Mexico as a third world country. So
Not a third world country. It's a middle income country, 15%. But it looks like, from our standpoint, like the third world country, it behaves at the border in terms of its infrastructure and management, et cetera, like a third world country. But my question is not about the money. It's about the capacity to, because it's not a third world country. They have engineers. There's a lot of technology in Mexico. They have a lot of universities. They have a lot of well-educated technical people. It is the capacity there to address this if it were a Mexican priority.
I would say yes, but also we don't see the public outcry. They're dumping the sewage in their own beaches. I don't hear, of course, I don't live down there, but I don't see the same pushback from the public on this. So maybe until that happens.
I'm bypassing the political will problems. But you answered the question. You believe they do have the capacity if the political will were there. But on the trash side, because that's a massive issue involving every household over there.
I've been looking at the problem for many years and asking myself the same question. The problem is continuity. Every 4 years, you have a group of people dealing, bringing probably no knowledge or experience to work on city and state issues, and then 4 years after, all that capacity gets lost because people now have money to open businesses, and the new bureaucrats come brand new with the intention of doing things, and often I talk to them and they regret that after their term is over, they haven't done enough. And but that's one part. The other is the chaotic urban footprint of Tijuana. This started after the war, and it was what I mentioned. It's a reality. If I'm a developer, I'll rather develop first and ask for permission later. It's faster and cheaper. So they are developing in areas that are not supposed to develop. Houses are coming down and large buildings are also collapsing because they're building in the creeks, in the canyons, right on top of the faults, the geological faults. And you go around town and the main area of Tijuana is now featured with all these very large buildings, high rises. But the rest of the city doesn't even have streets. So when you try to collect the trash, the truck not go anywhere. So people organize themselves and in desperation, they put the trash in the creek or in the sediment basin or they burn it. But the concessionaires also don't want to know about these places because the city don't pay them to collect the trash there. So the capacity has to be, or the urban footprint corrected somehow. which is the basis of moving vehicles around. And that would cost not just a lot of money, but who's going to say yes to remove their houses or the building or the store? It's very complicated. Authorities are trying, some are trying really hard, but there's a lot of resistance. And you saw the growth rate. One is growing so fast that if you, it's my case, I go to one area 1 month and the next month, the boundary of the city grew several blocks. So it's impossible to keep up with that and with the illegal acts of urbanization that happen every single day all over the city. They don't care about where the sewer is going to be installed, they just build. Where the trash is going to be accumulated or collected. And so I wish there could be a solution to that, even if the money exists. There's a lot to be done before the money can do something good.
Again, I'm gonna pull questions because we have 2 more questions for Oscar regarding his conversation, and we have 3 people sign up for public comment. So give me 1 second to get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not yet. Let me just get through, we had a member question via the chat, so, for Mr. Oscar, is all trash to be taken to OT landfill? If so, that will place a burden on the landfill that may be overwhelming.
We are exploring putting it in other places and repurposing some of the trash. The problem is that in those large amounts, it's pretty difficult to segregate separate trash. So, and the idea would be to collect all the good materials like the plastics. But there's no funding for that.
Second question for Oscar was, what are plans for handling high water flows in the coming year? We're moving into an El Nino, which is usually accompanied by heavy winter rains. Cleaning out the river channel and clearing invasive plants is a must.
Yes, the solution here will be to come and clean right after the storm. It's pretty difficult. The soil is muddy. The machines can get stopped, but we're going to attempt to rapidly move the trash out of the channel so we can collect it, avoid the problem that the flow sometimes pushes the trash under.
Last question via chat was, are they actively sampling ocean water on a regular basis in Mexico? Does anyone know the percentage of beach closures in Mexico?
You test regularly? We do get samples from Mexico. Mexicans give us 3 samples off the beach weekly. And we have our own through the city and the county, the city of San Diego, Public Utilities Department. We sample weekly also off the coast of Mexico. So lots of sampling being done.
There are some NGOs collecting the data because there's an organization called Clean Beaches Government. And they collect samples once a month and they publish the results the next month. So it's really difficult to close the beach. So typically that doesn't happen.
It's your question, come on.
Actually, responded to Edward. I wanted to respond to Edward's only question related to USMCA and political will. I think what's really important for all of us to recognize is that unlike NAFTA that had an environmental side agreement, the USMCA has Chapter 24, which is an environmental agreement, which has sanctions and consequences. So is there political will? Well, if the U.S. Congress were to press Mexico on the environmental impacts on this side of the border, I mean, IPWC has done an analysis, and the heavy metal discharges across the border here exceed Mexico's environmental limits. There's some are not, and they exceed EPA's. So that's actually a direct violation of
the USMCA. So, I think the political will could be there and people started to look at it in the context of USMCA. I agree.
Are you gonna come back to me at some point? They asked me to wait about 7 speakers ago.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. So in regard to many of the comments that were made here today by the other board members, I really appreciate them and they're extremely important. Some of them are a little bit beyond the scope of the IBWC, but it's so important that they're raised now because the truth is there's obviously a tremendous amount of new funding that needs to be obtained. And I know it wasn't mentioned in the earlier discussion, but when the EPA transferred over the 300 million to the IBWC, they had mentioned the year before and through that by their own estimate, and they needed at least 600 million in order to solve and maintain the plants, at least, up to 80% or so of the flows being treated at the IBWC facilities. So we all know we're at a minimum of 300 million short. And I know the real estimates are maybe even closer to up to $1 billion. So the political will, I believe there is a chance now to maybe push this forward with not only the elections that are coming up and the additional scrutiny, and the fact that politicians at the federal and state and county level are talking about it in a different way than they ever have before. So I appreciate all those comments, and that's what I'm going to be working on with our city. My question for the IBWC is, as to the 300 million that was transferred, are there any restrictions on the usage of it? Is it designated for the new plant solely, or is it allowed to be used for that 150 million in deferred maintenance?
It will be used not only to expand, but also for the rehab. If there's a requirement that has to go towards the expansion, the rehab is required and necessary to make this expansion successful. So we are using that 300 for both expansion and rehab.
All right. I appreciate the answer, and I just want a clarification on that because I really do believe it's almost a straight addition. If you say the 600 million, the original 300, the 600 million total, plus 150 million in deferred maintenance, I don't think was fully baked into that. And this is to me really separate than the 148 million that Mexico has promised. So in any event, I think we just need to really insist that we push this message out with different levers. There are ways to help create some of this political willpower in Mexico, including some of the things that their businessmen and government officials are trying to do, including discussion of a trans-border trolley they're talking about at Sandag and other things. We need to tie all of this together. So anyways, thank you for the clear answers. I appreciate it.
After this, we'll be taking public comment.
So to that previous question is that the UMCA agreement basically had, I think it's the second core list of projects, which is defined. It tells us what we're doing with the 300 million. However, those 4 projects exceed the 300. And so there is a list, and it is quantified and it's there. And I wanted to let everyone know that, it's an interesting economics of how we can, bake into this incentives. And I mentioned that the Orange County just flips the switch on a $491 million recycling plant. It's the largest recycling plant in the world. It produces 130 million gallons of water a day. That water at street value is worth $182 million. So by making the public investment of $491 million, it's producing a 37% every year forever return on that investment. And with the groundwater recharge that they're using, it's the most environmentally sound way to reprocess water. And we are sitting on a groundwater basin of 1,800 square miles. So although we could build the plant on our side, and that's what I recommend, and then send the water to the groundwater basins, both in the United States and in Mexico, that would basically keep what I live on the estuary. people here live in Coronado, it would basically stop the water and the sewage water from being dumped on Imperial Beach. But it also would provide an incentive, and that incentive is that Mexico is desperately needing water, and in our future, we desperately need water. And to basically send that water over to the Imperial Valley for agricultural use, the wastewater, or inject it in the ground. The basis of that is that we can get clean water or good water from the Colorado River in exchange, as well as Mexico portion of it be injected in their groundwater basin. And the beautiful thing is you don't have to distribute the water in pipelines. It comes through the aquifer and can be extracted all the way down the rivers, these river aquifers. And it works right now in Orange County. And that I think should be really looked at. It will be expensive, but California is sitting on $48 billion in infrastructure spending from the federal government, and it's mostly grants. That means that if we build this water facility and we're making income, we can pay that note off. But also, if it functions, the federal government has the ability to forgive the loan. And I really think that is, if we're going to build a cross-border relationship that's based on incentivizing water, sewage that's the way to go. And so thank you.
1 second, we need to have our public citizens be able to make their comments. So we had Ms. Laura Wilkinson sign up.
Hi, let me know if you need me to stand. First, my name is Laura Wilkinson. I live in the Coronado Cays. And I think I speak for everyone here that we love our families and we love our children and our grandchildren. And we all want the commons to be clean. We want clean water. We want clean beaches. We want a healthy community. I think I'll start there. But I think what needs to be impressed is the sense of outrage that you're getting right now from constituents. I know they're exhausted in Imperial Beach, but Paloma has breathed new life into this, and we're all very upset about this. I've actually done press conferences down in Tijuana. The Mexican citizens are also very upset about this, but they don't have the same right to assembly and the same right to free speech that we do. So they can't show it as much, but I guarantee you it's there. When we did a press conference there were 45 media outlets there. The community group that I'm with is stopthesewage.org. We're based here in Coronado. A few of our founding members, Stephanie Provis here as well. With climate change and our water reduction from the Colorado River that's forthcoming, it's going to be devastating to Tijuana. It's going to be very difficult for us. I think looking at those reverse osmosis plants that you were speaking of, the water recycling plants, is a great way to go. I have 3 questions and then 2 solutions. My dad said never bring a problem without a solution. First, where are our temporary fixes? I-95 was repaired after a hazmat destroyed half of it in 3 months. $13.7 million was spent fixing our Amtrak tracks here for a temporary fix. Heck, we've built Hoover Dam in 5 years, and yet the Gantt charts for this go as far out as 2032, which is categorically unacceptable. We need aeration ponds at Punta Banderas now. We need bacterial. You're the engineers, you know the temporary solutions. Can we put funds towards temporary solutions to reduce this immediately right now while we get the permanent fixes in, which we know take a little bit longer? Second question, the plant had almost a $4 million spillover a day ago. How is that still happening without the rain? I don't understand how that's still happening. And there are spills all the time from our own plant that we need to fix. And finally, the settlement with numerous entities, the City of San Diego, Chula Vista, Imperial Beach, the Port of San Diego, Surf Rider Foundation, and the California Water Boards. Are we in compliance with this with the IBWC? Are you in compliance with all the settlement terms here? And if not, how are we out of compliance and get back into compliance before they open the lawsuit back up? Because that's part of the settlement terms. Lastly, our solutions. I think a single-use plastic ban in both the state of Baja and the state of California would go an awful long way to fixing a lot of these problems. It's happening. New Zealand just to have a single-use plastic bin. So I think pushing for that may be a longer-term solution that would really help, but we have to start now to make that happen. And the second part of it is the Otay Mesa 2 border crossing just kind of broke the glass ceiling for us. They're going to be charging a fee to trucks coming across the border. So now that we have the establishment of a fee for border crossing, let's look at this, because the IBWC is out there with their hat in their hand every year begging for funding. And this toxic can has been kicked down the road for so long that our communities are suffering and in crisis at this point. So I think that's long-term funding and continual funding. And as long as the United States, just like Otay Mesa 2, the United States is collecting the funds, splitting it with Mexico. But if we're controlling the funds, we can tell, we can work with Mexico to make sure it's spent the way it needs to be spent for a final solution for this. So my grandchildren can swim at their beach once again without worry. Thank you. Oh, first, I do want to acknowledge our elected officials here as well, because they have done so much. Chris is here from Assemblyman David Alvarez's office, and they've introduced numerous bills at the state capitol and are fighting nonstop for us to get this fixed. And also John Duncan from the city of Coronado, who is also, did I miss anybody? Who am I missing? Oh, Mike Donovan, I'm so sorry I didn't see you sitting back there. So Mike Donovan as well as John Duncan, you know how much this means to your constituents, and we're very proud of you and your efforts to help us with this. Thank you.
Our second person who signed up for public comment was Mr. Carl Bradley.
Hi, thanks for the great presentations. Actually, most of my questions have been answered, but there's one item that I think Leon touched on that I just want to confirm an assumption I'm making, which is, once they initiated the more stringent criteria for water testing, I know in between we have record rains and stuff, but basically IV's been closed almost every day. And I can't see how that situation is going to get any better without the installation of new infrastructure. So is that a correct assumption?
Yeah.
Okay.
Expansion of the plant, the SAB plant reconstruction, absolutely. Yeah.
Third person is Mr. Dennis Quigley.
Thank you very much. My name is Dennis Quigley. I lived in Coronado since 1947. My family spent their time in the ocean, Coronado, and Imperial Beach in Mexico. So I care about the ocean. Couple of facts of life. There's a gyre circulates the water north to south, from south to north. Sorry, let me explain it more clearly. Flows down to the islands, and it curves around by the Mexican islands and comes back north. The place that the Tijuana outfall is the discharging is right in the middle of that gyre. So all the water is coming up here, us. Okay. So I feel very strongly about this. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but God bless the Mexicans. They were given a sewage plant. They couldn't maintain it, and they damn sure can't fix it. If we want the sewage plant fixed, the way to fix it is to send in the Army Corps of Engineers across the border and fix it. Now, that may seem a little bit unkind, not diplomatic, but I'm tired of swimming in Mexican sewage. So I suggest the time for talking is over. Time for action is now. And if nobody is willing to take action, I'm going to propose people of Coronado and the people of Imperial Beach march on the water and demand somebody do something. That's all. Oh, I'm sorry.
Very briefly in response, the SAB reconstruction is a public-private venture, so there are investors involved. So I think there'll be a lot more incentive to keep that going.
Hi, my name is Jennifer McKenzie. I live in Coronado. I worked for the Corps of Engineers and NAPAC for 20 years. Two questions. Has IBWC ever privatized, which is a 50-year solution, or considered annexation, which all have federal laws already established behind them? And my second part question is, has it's kind of free money, but have we ever considered partnerships with Corps of Engineers, specifically ERDEC, which is Engineering Research and Development Centers, or DARPA, for potential projects? I know they're always looking for locations for those.
I'm not sure what partnership opportunities there would be. Do you have something in mind, or
I just know
50-year
they're
partnership?
always, but that,
50-year partnership you mentioned?
no, that's privatization.
Oh. Well, I'm not sure that there's a lot of profit in our plan, so I'm not sure there are any privatization opportunities. We are looking at possibly the expansion with the further treatment of the solids, that we be able to privatize that. It's something we're looking at. I mean, that'd be successful, but we are looking at privatization.
I actually did wastewater privatizations.
Okay, well,
And
let's talk. Okay.
I think there's some great opportunities.
Okay, talk.
We had one more person sign up before the second.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening now. My name is Chris Johnston with Assemblymember Dave Alvarez. Thank you for the shout out earlier, Ms. Wilkinson. I'd like to begin by congratulating the new members on this board. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve. Really appreciate your dedicating your time to do this on important matter. And thank you to IBWC for hosting this meeting and for the presentations given. Mr. Rodriguez and Dr. Romo, still here. Thank you. I have to admit, it was pretty disheartening when we found out the scope of the deferred maintenance on the existing plant, and seeing how much has been allocated in the past year or past years. But we value and appreciate the transparency that WOC has come forward. And it's very important so that we know, and my boss knows, how much he has to advocate for when we do the budget negotiation. We're looking at our office, and the Assembly is very committed to looking at all potential solutions. Everything is on the table. A couple of solutions that Assembly Office has introduced in Assembly Bill 1597 that would establish a mechanism for our state of California to provide funding for water projects and infrastructure through the North American Development Bank. The state currently does not have a way of providing funding on the infrastructure in the water region. As this bill is co-sponsored by the entire San Diego delegation and in the state legislature, we invite everyone here to join our list of supporters, and you can sign up on our website. In the state budget that was signed into law on Monday, we were able to secure additional funding for Scripps Institutional Oceanography for an ocean monitoring project that will help assess the efficacy of some of these infrastructure projects that we are working towards. And this allocation and bill that we've introduced demonstrates that we believe that California needs to be a part in solving this environmental disaster. With that being said, we also recognize that implementation needs to happen now, not 2030 or later. Given the significant ongoing impacts to health, environment, and economy, the delegation also submitted a letter last month to the governor requesting a state of emergency declaration and urged him to direct the president to also declare a national emergency. By enacting the Stafford Act, which is the emergency statute, additional funding options become more readily available, including the FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund, which checked 2 weeks ago, they had about $10 billion in their fund available. So we need the emergency because of the magnitude of the problem is beyond our local and state and government to solve it our own without aid from the federal government. We cannot wait for USMCA 2.0. I'm pleased to know that the IBWC commissioner is going to testify at Congress tomorrow. We have the utmost confidence that she will be able to relay the gravity of the situation to lawmakers in Washington, and we appreciate her leadership on this issue. We need big, bold, and binational solutions, and I challenge all stakeholders and board members on this to come up with funding ideas, especially ongoing funding. I was particularly intrigued by trade fee that Ms. Wilkinson put up. Water reuse is a big component. Water is a commodity, and we need to make it sure that it plays that role. And I'm also intrigued by the sanctions that you mentioned in USMCM. We'll get into those. That concludes my comments. I want to end with one question, and that was in a meeting held by EPA earlier this year. Staff mentioned that authorizing language for IBWC to accept funding from state and other entities is still in limbo. Is there an update? Anyone from IBWC speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah. There's language in the FY 24 budget to allow that, but a lot of stays in there. That's good. Great. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions from members of the public?
Probably don't need the mic. This is probably somewhat simplistic, and it's great to see that a lot of trash. How much of the trash itself is contributing to the actual bacterial contamination? I mean, I think, and again, I could be wrong on this, but I think our main concern is the sewage and the closure of our beaches. So, I mean, are we going to be directing more of these funds to trash, or is it going to be for the actual sewage issue that's going to get things going again here in the Southern California?
Our priority is the wastewater as opposed to the trash. Trash is something we do need to address, but I think our focus is really on the wastewater. That answer your question?
But in a sense, of the hundreds of millions of dollars that are proposed.
That's all going to the plant. That's all wastewater. None of that is for trash projects.
I think I answered that question. There's studies about the trash and what its offshoot problems are. Most problems deal with water that's kept in it, like in tires and water, and mosquitoes dwell there. But very, very little, there's no chemical like off-gassing, and if that occurs, it's usually gone within 3 or 4 months because of the ultraviolet light. But the biggest threat is mosquitoes that live in the bottles and in the tire. That's the biggest threat from the trash.
There's also a recent study that's just been published that explains that the preservative that is put into tires kills fish. And they looked at it all over the west coast up to British Columbia. Why are these fish dying in the streams? It turned out they tested everything that could be tested, and it turned out it was the preservative in the tires that wore off tires on the road and got locked into the streams and down into the rivers, and that was killing the salmon. And so it's really important to take the tires out of the river valley and to keep the plastic, which disintegrates into something that is not habitable to fish and other wildlife. It needs to be stocked before it goes to the ocean, and it needs to get out of the estuary.
Here, I believe there's a confusion. Our funding is coming from the Water Quality Control Board. We're partnering with IBWC, but the funding goes strictly into water quality. They are concerned about microplastics.
I'm Dr. George Schmidt from Coronado Shores. If there's anybody else there from Coronado Shores, I am going to ask our general manager to put on a workshop at our big club about this public health crisis, and I would appreciate that you do likewise.
I was wondering about the tires that you say, it's here, the machines. I'm wondering about the tires. You mentioned that your contraption isn't going to be collecting tires. What happens to them? Do they go over? Do they go under? Do they?
The tires are too heavy to be controlled by these barriers, and so they typically move through the barriers into the landscape. history. No, under, big under. So we cannot control except for an apron that falls, but it's only 4 feet deep and the river gets really high. So it will be nearly impossible to control the problem.
We do on occasion, I like to say annually, we partner with the Border Patrol as well as Urban Corps, and we collect fires. Last year we collected about 3,000 fires in the river channel, so that's what we do with fires.
There are additional questions from the public?
Hi, Sandy Calif. I am a Coronado resident. I know something about oceanography and the rest. And the problem here is really, you keep calling it an ocean outfall in Mexico that's down on the end of the playa. It's a beach outfall. The sewage goes right on the beach. I would hope that we could convince, and I have been able to find out now, and I hope Richard Key can help us. Somewhere in Mexico, we can get a economic and like irrigation pipe to go 5 kilometers out the shore there and just build a reservoir and take it offshore. So even though the SAV plant may get up and running at some point, just like the IBWC plant, it won't run at specifications because of the expansion and the increase. And at least it will be offshore. And then the problem becomes the one of contaminating the offshore, something we understand a lot about since the Iberian plant of Santa Bay gives all the information we need to know about that. But anyway, I was hoping that maybe 6 months we could get an ocean outfall built there, a cheap one. I mean, we don't need to bore the sediment for structure. We just need to put a pipe there. It's not very difficult. It's not difficult engineering. So I would suggest that's the number one thing that we could even, as a we've got to create a non-government just to fund. Get it? Thank you.
Two comments. One was I was curious if there was any kind of response or any type of response about the temporary fixes that Laura had raised. Secondly, is there any kind of intent or thoughts of the IBWC making any kind of input to the review of the USMCA treaty that's scheduled for 2026? And I'm thinking that now's the time to start building the recommendations for upgrading renegotiation elements that could be included in or strengthening Section 24 out of the USMCA. It sunsets in 2032, which is before the 2035 population growth. So it strikes me, on top of what's been mentioned here about the new gateway at Otay entry level 2, there's a strength in the board here going forward as inputs to the trade through the State Department or directly through the White House. The trade office having influence and dialogue with them as to how to make a big issue. Because the issue that was in the environmental impact report for establishing the USMCA was lukewarm at best over something that's been a chronic problem. So personally, anything having to do with a quick temporary fix, secondly, any thoughts about how the board here might create this dialogue with good destruction?
There was discussion on temporary fixes to SAP. And there were like 4 different options, each additional cost. It was decided and concluded that by the time they could implement those, the new SAP would be up and running, but that would be a design or construction. And we didn't want Mexico to take their eye off the SAP, divert funds that would go to SAP. So decided, I'm not sure who decided, but it was concluded that it was better just to keep the push on SAP as opposed to trying to do some temporary fixes. It would probably take us as long, but complete. So
It's SAP isn't funded though.
correct, it's not.
It's not funded.
Oh,
There's no
no, that's-
ready project, and yet there's no temporary fix. So this could be years.
No, we expect they're supposed to go out for design, this summer for the new SAD plan. I think that's pretty, that's a done deal.
That's designed.
Okay.
When, do you know, on the Gantt chart, when completion would be?
Yeah, 2026.
So we'll live with this for 3 more years.
Right.
That's how acceptable. That sounds sort of good. It's not good. It was just the members of the board too. Did anybody want to?
We can solve this in 3 years, it's pretty good, how they're going on, but I know that one more day, they're acceptable with the beach.
They're looking for fixes to take it down.
Well,
And alleviate some of the misery for being.
well, it would be great if we get some of the temporary things going, but maybe we need to talk to Chris Johnson over there, because maybe David Alvarez has some solutions on that, he was great. Kind of environmental community. Put your guy on the spot there, but it's fine. Okay, it was good.
We are over our allotted meeting time, and I want to respect everybody's time. If you would like to continue discussing, Morgan will still be here as the after. Thank you all for coming on today.
Thank you.